I guess you heard about the NAR verdict this week. Raise your hand if you heard about that. Okay, good. Some of you didn't sleep this week. You were actually paying attention. Um, Raise your hand if you heard nothing about it. You don't know anything about the NAR. Okay, so some of you maybe haven't heard about it. So I think it's kind of a big deal and wanted to make sure that I covered this week. And we'll probably talk about it many times over the upcoming years as we move forward with it. But I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on it because it could potentially change our industry. There's some people who have said this is an earthquake to the real estate industry. Some people have said it's a nuclear bomb or it's like the Armageddon of real estate right now. Sometimes I think people come out with big headlines like that because some of it's clickbait. Some of it is, just trying to get views or trying to get responses. So I tend to be more optimistic about things because there's always something to be scared about. So I tend to try to be optimistic, and it's not necessarily, is it going to change things or not? For us, our goal is to figure out, okay, if this is going to happen, how do I respond? How can I make sure that I'm okay in the middle of any changes like that? So that's kind of my perspective on how I take it. Okay, some of you have come in the last couple minutes, and I noted that we are doing this at 4 o'clock rather than 1 o'clock. So if you can give me your opinion, we're taking an unofficial poll over here in the chat comments. Let me know what time works best for you on Mondays. 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Is there a different time? 6 a.m. If it's 6 a.m., I'm going to have Scott Reif handle these for me because because I'm not a 6 a.m. person. Now, I might record it and have an automation posted at 6 a.m., but I am not going to be here at 6 a.m. So, okay. Well, let me share my screen with you and see if I can do this without it going too crazy. Let me see here. I've got a few notes that I took today, and just wanted to talk about it this way. In a few different things. So, let me give you an overview for some of you who maybe haven't heard what's going on. There was a lawsuit. It's called the Sitzer lawsuit. Was filed against the NAR and Keller Williams, Berkshire Hathaway, Remax, Anywhere, several other brokerages. Was filed really back in 2019. So that's 4 years ago. It took 4 years to get to this point. So the way most court systems work is, you first you have the lawsuit, and then there's discovery where they're subpoenaing records, they're doing depositions, interviewing people, getting information from the other side, and that took 4 years to get all that. I say if, but there will be an appeal process, and it's likely going to take many more years for that to go. Because my guess is there will be an appeals level, and I think it'll be overturned, and if not, there's going to be another level of appeals, and I think it'll go to the Supreme Court. So that's all going to take a long time. So with that in mind, once they got through the 4 years of all the preliminary stuff, it really only took 11 days to present the information to a jury trial. It was a jury, as they would say, of our peers. They're people, just regular citizens, homeowners, and I believe there were 8 jurists. There were 9, but one of them got dismissed for personal reasons. So there was the remainder of 8. Of the 8, one of them was a female. The remaining ones were males, which I found to be kind of interesting since women tend to be the ones driving the home purchase a lot. But think about the think about the clients you've had. the wife is all excited, like she has this vision for what she wants the home to be, and the guy is sitting back like, okay, what's it going to cost? What's the commission? So the guy is always focused on the pricing, right? So I don't know if that's a good jury representation. Now, any of the flaws in the case, I have to say, I sort of fault the NAR, and I would say NAR because we're mostly associated with the NAR as compared to the other brokerages. I think it was a big mistake that they made by allowing juries like that to be a mix of so heavily men. And some of the other mistakes, I would put it at the fault of the NAR attorneys. And I'll get into some more of that as well. Took 11 days, but then the jury deliberations only took 2.5 hours, but really it was only about an hour to an hour and a half, because after the first hour and a half, the jury came out and he said, can you tell us again how to calculate how much they owe? So they knew immediately. It was unanimous. Within an hour, they knew what they were going to say. Hey, everyone, okay, who likes to pay commissions, realtor commissions? You don't like it? You don't like it? Yeah, I don't like it. Okay. Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, we don't like commissions. So it took a very short time. And so that's kind of how that went down. And then now what they allegedly did, here's what the NAR, Keller Williams, Remax, all these, here's what they allegedly did. The jury believed that there was a conspiracy, okay? A conspiracy where all these different organizations got together to enforce the clear cooperation rule from NAR, okay? So the clear cooperation rule from NAR, which is mandated on us, which, to be a part of the MLS and all that, we all had to do this. They were saying that there was a conspiracy to support that amongst these large brokerages. And this rule, the sticking point that they didn't like, they said that the rule basically mandated that sellers had to pay a buyer's agent, offer compensation in order for the listing to be listed into the MLS. Okay. And and then the jury believed that this rule caused commissions to be elevated, which harmed the sellers. Okay. And so the jury believed that the defendants knowingly and voluntarily participated in this conspiracy with the end goal of raising commissions paid by sellers. Okay. So that's what they allegedly did. So, one of the things I'll just throw in there, the commission that was required by NAR to be able to list in the MLS, it was required that it be at least $1, right? Do you all know that? You all aware of that? $1. So now they've changed it from $1 to zero. So in a way, you could say this is all about a $1 or zero commission. So do you think that the 3% to 6% range of what people pay realtors, do you think that's based on the fact that NAR required $1 for a listing to go into the MLS? Obviously, that's an unrelated number. So to me, it's pretty obvious that their requirement had nothing to do with the commissions of being 3 to 6%. To me, it's a fairly obvious conclusion that those are based on market rates. And if you look at the various markets around the country, you see that those numbers vary according to the market. It has nothing to do with the 1% or the $1 that's required. So, but that's what they allegedly did. And these big companies, they felt like we're in a conspiracy, that they were conspiring for these larger commissions. Now, one of the things that I'll point out is that there is no evidence that they presented during the entire time that they actually conspired between the brokerages for pricing. There was no evidence about that. The evidence showed that the plaintiffs didn't like paying commissions. They didn't like, having to pay it to the buyer's agent. They didn't like it, but there was no evidence that showed that there was a conspiracy. And that's what the antitrust laws are about. And that's what was very frustrating to me, that they were alleged. They even asked the one plaintiff point blank, so do you think your realtor and the brokerage was conspiring with other brokerages to set commission rates? He said, no, I don't think that. Okay. Well, that's what the antitrust laws are about. It's not whether you like paying the commissions. And if we're going to talk about commissions, let's talk about the commissions of attorneys. Attorneys typically are paid 30 to 40% of whatever they can get for their clients. So in this case, in other words, with it being a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit, the attorneys are going to get probably over $1 billion in this. So they're arguing about 3 to 6% for realtors. Come on, this isn't about the people. This is about realtors becoming extraordinarily filthy rich. Okay, so the financial hit then, because of the verdict, the defendants are now ordered to pay $1.8 billion in commissions, pay that back, that have been paid by the sellers. They have to refund that to the sellers. Of course, that's minus the legal fees. But then there's treble, which is whenever there's a antitrust type of suit, they're saying basically it's damages, the treble. For instance, if a landlord, those of you who are property managers, if a landlord doesn't return the earnest money, or I mean the security deposit to a tenant after they leave, they could be faced to have to pay 3 times the amount of the security deposit because of certain laws. And it's the same way with this, because it's a $1.8 billion settlement. Well, now they're going to triple that because of damages, and say, not only are we going to make you pay 1.8 billion, but we're going to triple it. So you have to pay $5.5 billion, which exceeds the net worth of all of those companies combined. So it's a ridiculous number. And, I don't know why back there in the jury deliberation room, they didn't just say, well, let's just make it $1 trillion. What about a zillion? Can we do a zillion? Let's make it $1 zillion. I always think these numbers are just completely absurd when they do this thing. So here are some of my thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Right now, I'm just kind of going through my little outline here, but at the end, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. So make sure you are ready to chime in there. I truly believe this is going to be overturned. And one of my thoughts about it is, how can 500,000? So they're saying that the class, the number of people in Missouri who are defrauded of this money, it's 500,000 people. Okay, how can and all of these people, these 500,000 people, they signed contracts, right? They signed listing contracts that said that they're paying this amount of commission, and I would bet that it specifies very clearly, like our contracts all say this amount's going to go to the buyer's agent. So 500,000 contracts were signed. So the agents performed on the basis of the signed contract, right? You don't do it for free. You do it based on, you put your effort in because, okay, you've signed a contract. Because of that, I will now give you my services, because now I'm guaranteed payment, and I'll give you my services for that payment. So 500,000 signed contracts, 500,000 agents participated based on the fact that there's a signed commitment by the sellers. So a jury of 7 men and 1 woman can override 500,000 contracts. Like, what about contract law? What about the fact that they committed? And if you can't rely on a contract, that's everything spelled out and written, how in the world can we ever have any type of agreements where we actually are willing to commit something if after the agreement they decide, yeah, I think that was too much money, I didn't like that. Like, it just seems like such a ridiculous notion to think that these people could pay 500,000 or could sign 500,000 contracts, and all of that is just washed away and doesn't mean anything. So contract law to me is one of the basic things. And would you believe this never came up in any of the proceedings? The NAR attorneys, none of them made any reference to the fact these people had signed a contract that spelled out exactly how those commissions were going to be paid. So, so how is it possible that, well, my next point, how is it possible that a jury can require a brokerage like Keller Williams to repay money that they never had? Uh, because, like, most of them, like Keller Williams, they're on a 64-36 split, right? So the brokerage only keeps 36%. 6% of that goes to the national franchise, which is Keller Williams, Gary Keller and them. 6%. So if the local brokerages and the agents kept 94% of it, how can Gary Keller be when he kept 6%, how can he possibly be held accountable to pay the other 94, which he never had? That, to me, that's an important point. And with Plum Tree, we're a 100% commission brokerage. So why would we ever get stuck having to pay commissions that we never had? So hopefully that will never be a thing. The other thing, well, I guess I already commented on that. The NAR requires a minimum commission of $1. So now that number is 0. They dropped it. So we're basically fighting over $1. The reality is that the market determines the rates. Okay. So another thing, and I kind of touched on this a little bit, but what about attorney commissions? Most state, and you can Google this later, but if you get on a state attorney association website, almost all of them will have reference in the fees to say something about the standard rate for paying attorneys. It's normal, or it's standard to pay attorneys a commission of 30 to 50%. Can you believe that? So attorneys can do that. They can publicize that it's normal to pay 30 to 50%. But now this attorney in this case is saying, oh, well, realtors, they've made reference to 3 to 6%. So that's they're violating antitrust. Well, the attorneys are doing it themselves. So to me, this is just another absurdity of the whole situation. And it's just ridiculous for an attorney who's making 30 to 50% of the fees of whatever he takes in to be acting like agents who make about 3%, 2 to 3% on a deal, like they're getting rich off of that. It's a crazy notion, and it's the height of its absurdity. So most of the testimony showed that each brokerage trained their own agents on how to keep their commissions high. So that was the crux of most of the issues. Like Keller Williams has training. They say keep your commissions high. Remax has training, keep your commissions high. I sat in that training. I was in the training, and I remember I didn't like it. I remember over in Mason, Ohio, being in a training where they were like, you work hard, darn it. Keep your commission at 6 or 7%. You deserve it. You work hard, darn it. And personally, I remember thinking, in this room of 200, am I the only one that thinks that I shouldn't make $25,000 for 8 hours of work? And I was kind of a nonconformist, right? And you all know that. But but here's the thing: every company has the right to set their own rates, right? So if you want to buy eggs and you go to Kroger, Kroger has the right to set the price of their eggs that they sell. Or if you go to UDF or you go to Meyer, they have the right to charge what they want for their eggs. As a broker, I own my company. I could say, hey, we're all going to charge the same commission. That's our company's prerogative, right? It becomes a problem when the companies conspire with other companies and say, hey guys, let's all charge the same amount. Everyone in? Cool. Yep. Got it. All right. Okay. So that's when it's an antitrust violation. There was no evidence of any of that. They gave no evidence that any of these companies conspired between them. Now, they all had trained their own agents to keep their commissions high, but there was no evidence that they conspired between them. So, have you ever noticed the price of a loaf of bread at Meyer is almost exactly the same as at Kroger, which is the same as at UDF or some of these other stores? It's about the same, isn't it? But that doesn't mean they're all conspiring. That just means that the market determines what the pricing really should be, right? So you pay what the market is drawing for that. And I believe that's what's going on in the real estate business. The market seems to be indicating that 3 to 6% is a pretty good, reasonable range, and that's what people are willing to pay. So, okay, so but most of the testimony did not, or none of the testimony actually showed any kind of actual conspiracy. And all companies have the right to set pricing for their own companies, and that tends to be drive the market price for the product. Eggs, gas, bread, etc. all have similar pricing, but that doesn't mean there's a conspiracy. Okay, so there's some potential outcomes to all this. Every one potential outcome is that everything will pretty much stay the same, and there's going to be a few extra disclosures. All right. Personally, I believe this is what's going to happen. I think everything's going to stay the same, and there's probably going to be some extra disclosures. There might be a little bit more pressure to lower the pricing, but I think everything's going to stay about the same. And a couple clues to that are out in Washington. There's several areas in Washington where they've actually already instituted that there's a 0% commission is required for buyers agents, but they still pay the normal 3 to 6%. It's still normal. Nothing changed when they changed that. Also, the New York. Have any of you heard about the New York MLS? There's been a panic, like, oh no, New York just changed the way that they're no longer allowing sellers to pay. Um, let me see how they're no longer allowing listing brokerages to pay a buyer's agent. But what's going on there is that they're basically requiring on the closing statement that the payment to the buyer's agent has to show that it's coming directly from the seller. Okay. So that's what changed in New York, but that's actually been in place for a few years, and everybody's still getting the same commissions. Now, our commissions in Ohio, at least, actually in all of our markets where we are, um, the closing statement shows that the commission is going directly from the seller to the buyer's agent, right? It doesn't show anything that it goes through Plum Tree and that Plum Tree is paying the buyer's agent. It doesn't show that. So in a way, we're already doing what they're talking about in New York. So, and it hasn't changed anything. Okay. So anyway, that's hopefully I didn't confuse you too much on that. But I believe this. I think it's going to stay pretty much the same. Possibly a few more disclosures that say that commissions are negotiable. Another thing that could happen, and there's a lot of talk about, oh, what if buyer's agents go away, or if the buyers have to pay their realtor, their buyer's agent? Well, it's possible that lenders will create new programs to include commissions in the closing costs. So even though the buyers, or it could be wrapped into the loan. So if there's this massive earthquake in the real estate industry, I don't think anyone would think it's a good situation for buyers to be unrepresented, right? Uh, I think everyone understands that both sides should have representation, the buyers
Yeah,
and the sellers. Did someone have a comment there?
I agree, Chris.
Okay, cool, man. I think it's possible there could be some new loan programs. Now, another thought, there's some people speculating on this, is that it could be that states or even the federal government may require sellers to pay buyers directly instead of the listing company. Let me see what. Oh no, I'm sorry. Look at the last one. The government may say it's illegal for sellers to pay the buyer's agent, and this would be the extreme response. So it'd be like a RESPA violation for a seller to pay a buyer's agent. So it's possible the government, Department of Justice, may weigh in. And I'll be honest, the Department of Justice is not in favor of realtors right now, and so they're very anti business. The Department of Justice right now is very anti entrepreneurship, and there's so many big um, causes. Like, just think about who could be behind this. Like, who would favor this? Well, think about BlackRock. I mean, happens to have the most money in the world, BlackRock, and they definitely have the ear of the U.S. federal government right now. Do you think BlackRock wants buyers agents involved in helping people acquire properties? Well, no. They're putting 25 to 30 to 50% of their portfolio in real estate. So of course the great big huge Wall Street money, they're not in favor of what we're doing. So there's massive amounts of money working against us in this. So with that, the government, it is possible, could go against us on this. So what's our response to all this? Okay. My first thing I would say is don't panic. Don't panic. Keep building your business. Okay. The worst case scenario, okay. The worst case scenario is that I mean, this is bad. This is if the federal government gets in there and says it's illegal, and we're going to take you to prison if you're a buyer's agent. I mean, if it gets really bad, the worst case scenario they're saying would be that maybe half of realtors may end up getting out of the business. So what that means to me is you only have to be better than half of the agents, and that is so incredibly easy. Like, if you're going to be in a spelling bee, or if you're going to be in some type of academic competition, or even if it's a athletic competition with people your own age, and you only had to be better than half of the people. I mean, we're not talking you have to be in the top 10% or top 5%. We're talking about you have to be better than half, right? If you're not better than half, you probably should get out of the business. you know, but I don't. I'm sure none of our Plum Tree agents are in the bottom 50%, right? Most of our agents are in the top 10%. So, um, I think it's important to keep in mind. I think I have my points out of order here. Um, well, if a large percent of agents are pushed out of the business, then that means more business for those who stay. Okay. because there's still going to be the same number of real estate transactions. All right. So that doesn't mean half the realtors go. So now no one's going to buy or sell houses. No, they're still going to do it. So if there's half the realtors in the business, that means we'll make a lot more money because there's going to be twice the business for those of us who stay. So your goal should be to stay in the top 50%. And I would say get into the top 20 or top 10%. And that's our goal. My goal is always to get our Plum Tree agents in the top 10%. So, and I'll bet you a large pizza, all of this is going to be overturned at the Supreme Court at some point. So I don't think we need to be worrying, but worst case gets to worse. If you can stay in the top 50%, you'll be fine. And so the last thing I'll say is focus on the listing side of the business. If all those buyers agents go out, and that's why we're going to immediately be starting to do focusing on listing properties. We're going to teach our agents over the next 6 months. It's going to be basically Plum Tree Listing Academy. We're going to be training our agents on how to be listing agents. So what do we do as a brokerage? We're going to learn to dominate the market by listing properties. So it doesn't even matter if buyers agents go away, because we're going to be the ones that list all the properties. And that's, so hang with me. Let's do this together. Let's learn to list properties. We're going to do it better than anyone. And we're not going to be intimidated by these lawsuits. We're going to definitely, we're going to rise to the top, focus on the listings. And then if we focus on listings for the next year, and then all of our agents become listing agents, and then this all goes away, we'll still be in a better spot because we're listing properties, and that's going to be a better way to go. So, gosh, I don't have the book. Maybe Scott, what's the name of that book? Do you have that, Scott? Yeah, there you go. Dave.
It's Agent's Edge.
Yep. And Dave has it right there in his hands there. Agent's Edge. My brain's always going blank on me. So, but that's going to be the book we're going to go through as a brokerage over the next several months. So now Scott Reif is our managing broker for the state of Ohio. And I lean on him a bunch. Matt, great. Got the Audible version of it. That's how I got it. Actually, I've got it both ways now. I've got it paper and Audible. But I wonder if Scott or any others, if you might have any other thoughts about any of the stuff going on.
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, two of the best books I've ever read on real estate are one is Gary Keller's The Red Book, and the second one was Agent's Edge that I read this weekend. And both of them have a definite listing theme. You know, Gary Keller would say leverage with listings. That was one of the, the beginning of the book, one of the foundations of that book. And then Agent's Edge is all about listings, specifically about the listing presentation. And but that's our way to get through this, whatever it turns out being. I mean, we don't know yet. It's we're right now living in that fear of the unknown, but we know that if we focus on listings, whatever changes, there's always going to be people who need their homes marketed. There's always going to be a need for listing agents.
Yep. And that's
what was the other name of that? The other book?
Well, the two that I mentioned were it's people at Keller Williams call it the Red Book because the cover is red, but it's Gary Keller's Millionaire Real Estate Agent. It's an old book, probably about 20 years old, maybe 25 years old, and it's kind of always been the gold standard for real estate training for new agents. And then what I think is going to replace it is Agent's Edge, because it takes this kind of modern spin on it, talks about the importance of the listing presentation, client relationships, good real estate photography, how agents market themselves. And that it's like, again, one of the best books I've read. The author, I forget his name off the top of my head, but he's been the number one Remax agent for the last 6 years. And listening to him talk, you can Google his name, and he's been on a lot of podcasts as he released his book. That's kind of what got me going, following him. Very humble guy. And he's in fact been the agent for a lot of, like, Sylvester Stallone wrote the foreword of his book because he was Sylvester Stallone's realtor. So he's done a lot of high-end markets in Los Angeles is where he specializes, and he does high volume transactions for athletes and celebrities and stuff. But to hear him talk, he's also very humble, very approachable, and just kind of takes this new approach to real estate, different than some of the cliche that you see from a lot of other gurus and trainers. So it really resonated with me, that I liked his approach, and just putting the client first, putting the agent ego on the sidelines, and just providing tremendous client service, and really focusing on listings.
Cool. Yeah, good stuff there. Awesome. I forgot to show you a little interview. There's actually an interview of the attorney who won the case, and let me show you this interview because I think it's kind of it's telling of the personality of the guy who is our adversary, basically.
All right, so what does the ruling mean for the
Can you hear
industry
this?
at large, and maybe what you pay for a home? Where do we go from here? Joining us now on set is Bess Friedman. She is the CEO of Brown Harris Stevens and a member of the National Association of Realtors, and Michael Ketchmark, the lead attorney of that lawsuit representing 500,000 homeowners in Missouri. Bess and Michael, thank you for joining us here. First to you, Michael, what is big settlement here? 1.8, or verdict, I should say, $1.8 billion. First up, where does that money go? Is money going to be kicked back to people who bought homes, or where?
Sure. I mean, we view it as a day of accountability. And I told the jury, this case is simple. It comes down to premises I learned when I was in kindergarten. If you take something that doesn't belong to you, you give it back. The money will be returned to the homeowners that were the victims of this rigged system.
How many of you believe that? How many of you believe all that money is given back to the homeowners? Nope. Just an example, we had that lawsuit against us, the TCPA. It was a $175,000 settlement. The plaintiff got $6,000. The attorney got $169,000. So I don't trust attorneys often. If John Jonas is on this call, I do trust you, buddy. But these class action attorneys, I don't trust them, and I don't believe what he's saying there.
Going on in our country for about 100 years, and it stops today. And we're going to hold these corporate real estate companies and National Association of Realtors accountable for their conduct.
And I understand you are ready, or have already filed, more lawsuits.
Yeah, the day that the minute that verdict came in, we filed the lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors and these other large corporate real estate companies to bring the same relief nationwide. And we expect the damages in those cases to be in excess of $100 billion. And look, we are wasting right now about $50 billion a year in wealth that's being taken out of the pockets of homeowners and transferred over to these corporate machines that have taken.
Okay, we're wasting. All right. So they're saying all that money you earned as a buyer's agent was just wasted because you're not necessary. Right. And I think a massive blunder by the NAR attorneys and all the other attorneys were that they did not show the value of where that money is going and why. Why is that money going in the direction that it is? They completely, the NAR didn't even cross-examine any of the witnesses or any of the plaintiffs. It was an absurd trial. So Anyway, so he's saying it was just it was wasted.
For real estate, and it's got to stop. The National Association of Realtors takes in almost $250 million in fees.
How many of those fees come from commissions from these sales? Well, none of it. I mean, eventually, down the road, but the NAR doesn't set fees. They don't set commissions. They don't profit from the sales of houses. So this is another straw man argument that's set up.
Real estate agents, because they have a stranglehold on the market. And
that's okay, Michael, but that's the NA. He's talking about the NAR, National Association of Realtors, which you are a member.
Yep.
But are you a corporate machine?
No, we are not. And I can't comment on the lawsuit because it was in Missouri, so I'm not going to talk about that. But what I can say is that the majority of all real estate transactions are done with two agents, a buyer's agent and a seller's agent. And what is being said, I think, is completely untrue. It takes away from the fact that the buyer's agent adds incredible value to the transaction. And so I think the narrative out there, the Wall Street Journal had an article where they referred to NAR as a cartel.
Can you believe that Wall Street Journal would refer to the realtors as a cartel? Oh my gosh.
It's ridiculous. And I think there's hardworking agents who are out there representing buyers every day. And this totally takes away from that. And I think it's unfortunate. It's the wrong narrative because we work together. It's cooperation. You get the best price when everybody works together.
And I'm sure, Bess, that there's people that obviously you're selling a home, you'd like to pay as little as you could. I mean, everybody wants to pay as little as they can for everything across whatever the asset class is.
That's
for
right.
Most people, including myself, I will never buy anything more expensive than my home. This is the most important and complex financial transaction that most of us will
100%.
ever go through.
That's right. And that's why, you have someone, if you're selling your home, you hire someone to represent you. They're your fiduciary. And also buyers want somebody to represent them, to talk to them about the pros and the cons, the neighborhood, the financing, everything. So you want to have two people, just like you would in a divorce. You want to have two people on the side of the transaction.
So think about all that you do as a buyer's agent to help people get through a transaction. Like they have no clue. Like nor does the seller, as far as they think, okay, let's just use Zillow and everyone, it's like buying a car. All right. Well, it's not. It's complicated. You have loan processes, you have inspections, you have addendums, you have disclosures. The whole thing is immensely complicated. And for them to make it sound like that buyer's agents aren't really needed in the process is a complete absurdity.
This is more of a marriage than a divorce, but
and she made a point about each side should have their own representation, like in a divorce. Like who wants to have one attorney represent both parties in a lawsuit? That's absurd.
Can be a divorce,
So Michael, is your beef with the NAR? Is it with the compensation structure? Do you think that, and we've talked before, that there shouldn't be a buyer's agent, or if they do, the buyer's agent should not be paid by the seller, because that may be the conflict, and maybe if you're a buyer, you actually pay your buyer's agent.
We got nothing against buyer's agents. I think they're awesome. But the person they should pay for is the person they're working for. What this member of the National Association of Realtors.
Okay, so he thinks the person who pays them is the person who they're working for. Okay, that's a legitimate opinion, right? But that means nothing. That's an opinion that has nothing to do with antitrust laws. Okay, do you understand how there's a difference there? That has nothing to do with whether they conspired to set commission rates. He doesn't like it. That's his point.
She just gave away the case. She said you have competitors who are working together. They're colluding together to fix the prices.
She didn't say they're working together to fix the prices, in case you missed that.
No.
I mean, that's what's happening. That's what the jury heard 2 weeks of evidence of.
Have you ever gone to a gathering, or have you ever been involved in any real estate scenario where all the people in the room from different brokerages were saying, hey guys, let's all charge the same thing? Have any of you? Of course not. None of us have, because that's not actually a thing. We do not conspire, especially on pricing.
We revealed the documents, we revealed the videotapes, we revealed all of the email.
The stuff that he revealed was not that they were conspiring together. The stuff that he revealed was that they were, trying to help their agents get higher commissions for their work. And if you go to any industry, like I watched tons of sales videos. Alex Hermosi, I don't know if any of you've listened to him. He literally has all the time has videos on how to charge more for your services. I listen to many sales coaches, and it's nothing to do with NAR. It's just that's what salespeople do. You learn how to charge a higher fee for what you do. So.
And the CEO of the NAR testified at trial and took the stand, and we exposed him for what he is. It is a cartel. It's a cartel that is
not a cartel. I
it is
really
a
take
cartel
offense
that
at
is
that. It is not a cartel.
I'm sure you do, and I take offense at the fact
Well,
that the
because
NAR.
listen, in Brooklyn for a long time there was no co-broking, and you know what that does? A disservice to the consumer. What you're saying is really offensive, and I take.
Her point is true. It used to be that they didn't have buyer's agents, and buyer's agents were the ones who lost in all those transactions. And that's how we evolved into the system that we have now, is to give equal representation to both sides and fairness to both parties in the deal.
It is not a cartel. I'm just telling you, it is not a cartel.
Can you answer this question for me?
Yes.
Why are the commissions in the United States 2 to 3 times higher than
you can negotiate them at any time.
The jury heard videotape evidence that from 6%, but they only go up.
All right. So what does the ruling mean for the?
My dog gets a little crazy when the Amazon guy gets here. Hey, shut up. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, what an absurdity. What are your thoughts about that video you just saw? What do you think about that?
Well, I think this is pretty typical of our judicial system in America today. Just look at what's happening in New York with Donald Trump. And that's just another case where a specific judge has had this vendetta toward this individual. And I think that we have the same thing going on here. And it doesn't just stop with these attorneys saying, hey, we're going after the realtors. Like you said earlier, the government at the highest level controls the news media, so they control what gets put out to the public. And here we go, the big vicious circle. And I think we're in a time where people getting sued is at an all-time high, especially frivolous lawsuits like this one, for example. And I think each of us as agents need to just be very careful to cross all of our T's and dot all of our I's, and let's keep Chris out of the frying pan.
I like that. I like that phrase.
Chris, I do have a question. Do you think it's wise that we start using buyer's agent agreements? Do you think that protects us in any way or gives us some type of insulation, if you will?
Yeah, I think it definitely adds an additional layer of protection, so that you could potentially be paid by the buyer if anything goes wrong, and it shows your commitment to them and their commitment to you. So definitely, and that might become one of the required things. And Matt, I appreciate that you're ahead of the game a little bit there, because that's one of the potential directions that all this could go in, I believe. So,
yeah, I just wish we had a more pared down version of a buyer's agent agreement. I've seen one pagers that are very, very simple and do the job. My only complaint about the Cincinnati buyer's agent agreement is it tends to scare people, because goes through in a much more complicated way what could be said very simply.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So maybe that will be a good step for us as a company, will be to have attorneys write up our own version of that. Because, and we do have a sort of we have a buyer's agent. We have a buyer rebate form. If any of you are interested in giving $1,000 rebate of your commission to your buyer clients, I used to use this all the time when I was an agent, and so I would give $1,000 rebate when a buyer would let me represent them in a deal, and that helped me to get a lot of the internet business because it separated me from the other agents on the internet. But I built into that an exclusive buyer representation verbiage so that they were committing to work just with me, and then I would commit to work work with them as a buyer. So yeah, that might be something that we do as a brokerage. So that's good feedback.
I have a question.
I know, Chris.
Oh,
Tommy, I think you were
first.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Forgive me. I'm the new guy. So I'll just go ahead and preface that. Does it really matter for us where that 3% comes from? Let's say it is 3% being a buyer's agent. If it comes from, the sellers, or if it comes from the people we're representing, like, does it affect us necessarily, or does it affect the market really, which entity it comes from? And again, forgive me, I'm the new guy. So
yeah, that's a good question. And if others have other answers to that, open to hearing your perspective. But my perspective is that it doesn't. I don't think it makes a difference on if the listing brokerage is paying it or if the seller is paying it directly. I don't think it's going to be different. I think it's just disclosures and verbiage and, how you word it on a contract. But I think I can't imagine a world where they create a system where buyers go unrepresented. Other than one of the things that attorney said was, why are the commissions so much higher in the States than they are in other countries? And it's as if because we have this monopoly, but it really isn't. It's more expensive here. One thing is because in the other countries that they're comparing us to, real estate is about twice the cost of what it is in the U.S. So it's very expensive real estate. And so the percentages stay lower because the real estate is so expensive there. Another reason is because their real estate systems suck. Okay. We have a really good system here, but you have to pay a little bit more percentage wise for the system. But how many of you have tried to look for real estate in foreign countries? Have any of you ever tried to do that before? Where they don't have MLSs like we do here. Like each brokerage will list their listings, but they don't have like a network like we do here. And how do you pay for the network? Well, this is how we pay for it, is through these systems that have been set up. So as a buyer, you have much more choice here. You have many more options, much more selection, because our system just gives you exposure to everything that's available for sale out there. You don't get that in foreign countries. And so it always bugs me when I hear people saying, oh, we should be more like Australia. Well, no, they should be more like us. We've got a really good system. And to say that, over in England, you don't have to pay as much. Well, real estate in England sucks. It's terrible. I had some British clients before, and they're telling me, like just an example of the systems in England, you can get, I think they call it gazumped. Have any of you heard that term over there? You can get gazumped over in England, where like the day before closing, if another person comes in with a higher price, then you get gazumped, and the house can go to them rather than you the day before closing. So to suggest that other countries have a better system for real estate, I don't think that's a fair thing. And we have a better system, and therefore, maybe the percentages will be a little bit different. So anyway, I can't even remember what question I'm answering now. I think, Ron, did you have a question there, buddy?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in on the buyer's agreement. Actually,
Yeah.
NAR last week did put out a statement saying that that's one of their suggestions is to have a buyer's agreement. That way, you kind of protect yourself. And I would also want to say that when you explain things to your buyer, you need to explain how important you are and what you bring to the table. Just like when you have to go in for a listing, you got to show people that you're better than somebody else or going to do more. So those are some of the things that need to be addressed also.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And with there's a whole lot to that. And I guarantee I can through my negotiating skills, I can help people as representing buyers. I can get them a much lower price than they can get on their own. And that's just one of the qualities. But how do they get through the whole process? I can get them from contract to the closing. There's something like, I forget what the number is. I think it's like 66 people will touch the transaction between the contract and the closing table. And so your role as a buyer's agent is to make sure all 66 of those people are united and headed in the same direction so that we can get across the finish line. So that's the role of it. And without a buyer's agent, it's going to be really hard, and stressful, and confusing to buyers, and they will not get the best deal, and they'll end up overpaying for a lot of things. So cool. What else? Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Yeah, as an agent that has done the bulk of my work as working with buyers, the thing I find very beneficial, again, is the exclusive right to represent form that we can get on the dot loop. They're in the archives. We can, or not the archives, but the
library.
The files where we can go and pull files from. Plum Tree's got this Columbus Board of Realtors, and I like the Columbus contract because it does list and it does have all the information of the 3% that I work for 3% working with buyers, and that the buyers know right up front that they're responsible for that should a seller not offer any representation. And I just closed a deal last month where we worked with a private individual that was not on the MLS, and my buyer was happy to pay me the 3%, and we got it across the finish line, and it led into another deal through a referral, and it led to another one, and life's good, but those exclusive right to represent forms are really good because it does spell out, it's a contract basically, and your buyer signs it, and we get it signed, and they know that they're on the hook for 3% if the seller doesn't offer anything. And it's worked good for me.
Yeah, fantastic. That's the exclusive buyer representation contract. That's a good way to go. Yeah, good input there. Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions? If you're talking about how the Columbus contract puts it all out there, spells it all out, who's paying what, for what, how much is the seller paying. And I was thinking, if I was one of the NAR attorneys, I would have subpoenaed as many people as I could who were the plaintiffs, and I would have subpoenaed all the contracts that they had gone through, the listing agreements where they had to pay a buyer's agent. And I would get all those contracts and say, hey, when you signed this, what were you thinking? Like, why would you sign this? Like, are you saying you didn't understand it? Like, why did you sign it if you didn't understand it? And I would go through it. I would treat it like contract law as opposed to do you like paying realtors? That's what it ended up being. So cool. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments before we head out? I see a couple questions. Does that mean that seller agent will work in dual capacity if the buyer is not represented by an agent? Yes, that's likely what it will mean is that if they were to push out buyer's agents, and I don't think that'll actually happen, but if they did, then that would mean that the listing agents would basically either be working in a dual agent capacity, so they would be forcing dual agency, which 99% of people would agree that's not a good idea. And they'd be forcing that, or they would be forcing the listing agent to represent the seller, and the buyers would all be unrepresented. And that's seems like a real bad idea.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
This is Amy Hamilton, and
Hey, Amy.
Just to let the others know, I worked in the legal field for 30 years, and we pay. The first thing that the NAR representative should have said was, "We are not paid by the consumer. NAR is funded by the agent's dues, agent's fees. We don't get our money from consumers." And secondly, we pay the NAR all that money for our dues, and they obviously hired a piece of crap law firm. I mean, really, it could not have been much worse. So yeah. I don't, and with all their faulty role they've been through this year, they're obviously doing a lot of other things other than representing their agents.
Yes, I agree with all of that. Now, Amy, you bring up an interesting point, that they aren't paid by the consumers. So one of the questions that I've heard that was raised has to do with standing. How can a consumer be suing the NAR when they didn't have any direct business arrangement with them? Like, how can they be suing them? There's no standing there. So it would have to be someone who is actually a client of NAR that would sue them.
Yep. There's all kinds of issues there that should have been brought up that were not brought up. So their law firm is not doing them any service here.
Nope. And that's why the CEO resigned a day or two after the verdict, I believe.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. He'll still get his paycheck, though, for a while. So, okay. Any other thoughts there? Yeah, go, Scott.
Even though this lawsuit was, we'll question how legitimate it is, we can always look at these circumstances and learn from them, and also be aware that hundreds more of these lawsuits are being filed. So now that there's this public awareness, they see this big, $5 billion settlement because there's treble damages on an antitrust suit. So that 1.8 turns into over 5 billion. Now the whole industry is going to be aware of this, and there's going to be all kinds of repercussions to that, this ripple effect. So as agents, we need to be cautious of how we phrase things. And I'm looking back at my career and thinking of times where I've listed a house and I might have discounted the commission. And I've had agents call and beat me up over that and say, "You can't list at 2.5%. What are you doing? That's undermining realtors." Or an agent, maybe I did a limited service listing at $500, and I have agents calling and beat me up over that. We have to be careful if we don't want to be on the giving end of those types of commentaries, because that is price fixing. If you're trying to, if you're commenting on what someone else has listed something for as far as the compensation or the commission, where I've had agents email when I was a broker of a company I owned, an agent emailed an agent in my firm and said in writing, I refuse to show your listing because your commission is not 3%. Is that price fixing? I'm not an attorney, but we have to be careful of the language we use, how we communicate with other agents, and what we put in writing when it comes to these matters, because it is a very sensitive topic right now. And there is a big target on our industry right now.
Yeah. And in addition to all of that, which is a great point, social media. Be careful what you're putting out in social media, because actually they used some social media posts in this trial to show an attempt to influence commissions in a certain direction. So be careful out there. That's a great point, Scott.
Yeah, I don't think Scott's comment is price fixing at all. I've ran into this myself, where I have had a buyer want to look at a property where they did not offer any buyer broker representation. And I just let my buyers know, look, I'm happy to show it to you if you want to see it, but understand that, you're going to pay the 3%. And, if they want to see it, fine. If they don't want to see it, then that's their choice. And if somebody doesn't want to look at a listing because they're not offering buyer broker representation, I don't see anything in a legal aspect being wrong with that. It's just, I think you're going to turn off a lot of buyers and a lot of buyer brokers because of that.
You had a conversation. Your conversation was, well, either the buyer would pay it, or it's totally fine to have a conversation with your buyer to say, we'll negotiate a 3% commission as part of your transaction. You didn't call and beat up the other agent over what they listed it as. And then you have two firms talking to say, well, let's all stick to the standard price. Why aren't you sticking to the standard price? That could be price fixing. So I agree with what you're saying. Is not price fixing. But if someone were to call up another agent and say, hey, get on board with the team, let's all list at 6%, or let's all offer 3% buyer's commissions. And if you don't, you're not part of the club. That could be construed as price fixing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm agreeing with you.
Yep.
I agree with everybody there. With other agents, pressuring other agents to charge a certain amount, that's what can get us into trouble. That's where the antitrust stuff comes into play. So yeah, those are good issues to be sorting out there. So
we've done the same thing, as Scott said. They want to look at it, then, and of course you can put in the offer and the other terms and conditions that the seller's to pay the 3%. And if they accept the offer, great. And if they don't, then life goes on.
One of our agents asked me recently, he said, hey, is it okay for me to tell my client I charge 6% because that's pretty much the standard rate? And I was like, no, don't use the term standard rate. Okay. That we've all conspired here. We all know what the standard rate is. And if any company is non-standard, it would be Plum Tree, because our agents, because you all have the ability to be flexible with your commissions. So nothing standard about what we do. That's for sure. Cool. Any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah. When you start the Listing Academy, how are we going to do it? Are we going to do it on Zoom, in person? What?
Beginning next week, in our BAM sessions, we're going to be going through our Listing Academy. So we're going to be going through that book by Jordan Cohen, Agent's Edge. We'll be taking a chapter per week. I highly recommend everybody get a copy of that. You'll profit immensely from it, and take notes. And we're going to start with that, Agent's Edge by Jordan Cohen. And then we're going to go in and we'll have YouTube videos that we'll be watching. and there's many amazing resources out there for generating leads for listings, listing leads, and how to talk to people and how to overcome objections and how to do a listing appointment and how to follow up and how to market listings and all of that. So our agents who hang with us over the next 6 months and attend our BAM sessions on Mondays or watch the replays of them, which we'll be posting on our Facebook group, those agents will be the ones who will be the best equipped for whatever the future holds. Cool. All right. Anything else? I've got till midnight, so we can. Well, thanks for joining in with us. If anyone needs help with anything, feel free to reach out to me. Texting is the best way to reach me. Actually, if you have positive things to say, positive things to talk about, text me. If you have negative things to say, text Scott. And any complaints, see Scott. But man, I'm really excited to be able to see where anytime there's turbulence in the market, that there's always opportunity there. So don't be stressed. Be excited because there's going to be opportunities in the future, and we're going to do what we can to capitalize on it. So other than that, thanks for coming. Go have a great week. Go make some money. All right. Bye-bye.